I didn't know my life was about to split cleanly in two that night. Before, when I still believed love meant patience and compromise, and after, when I finally understood the cost of staying quiet while being diminished. We were sitting in the car outside his parents' house, the engine idling, the dashboard clock glowing an ugly red, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. He stared out the windshield, hands folded, jaw tight. I thought he was bracing for another awkward comment from his family, another comparison I'd learned to swallow. I was wrong. My family still thinks my ex was better than you in every way, he said, casually, like he was commenting on the weather. For a second, I honestly thought I'd misheard him. I waited for the laugh, the backpedaling, the reassurance. Something, anything. It didn't come. So I smiled. Not the brittle smile people expect when they think they've hurt you, just calm, clear, almost relieved. Good to know, I said. He turned toward me, eyes wide. What? Good to know, I repeated, my hands steady on the steering wheel. In that moment, something inside me settled, a quiet, irreversible click, like a door finally closing. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg him to choose me. I simply ended the relationship that same night. At the time, he thought I was overreacting. He said every family has opinions. He said love should be flexible. He said I was being dramatic. What he didn't understand was this. I wasn't reacting to one sentence. I was responding to a year and a half of being measured against a woman who wasn't even in the room, to dinners where I was invisible, to smiles that never defended me, to a relationship where I was always competing with a ghost. Days later, he tried to go back to her, the woman his family adored, the woman they never let go of. Someone else answered the door. And what that woman told him shattered the fantasy his family had built, exposed the lie they'd all been worshiping, and sent him calling me nonstop, desperate for a second chance he no longer deserved. I'm 36 years old. I've been through enough relationships to know when something is broken beyond repair. And that night, sitting at a red light with his words hanging between us, I realized something painfully simple. Love doesn't ask you to shrink, and respect, once lost, doesn't grow back. That was the night I chose myself. I was 34 when I met him, old enough to know what I didn't want, but still hopeful enough to believe I might finally have something real. I worked in operations for a mid-sized logistics firm, the kind of job that keeps your mind constantly juggling details, deadlines, people's expectations. I was good at it, reliable, grounded, the friend everyone called when their life tilted slightly off balance. He was 36 then, calm on the surface, thoughtful in conversation, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We met through mutual friends at a casual birthday gathering, nothing cinematic, no sparks flying across the room, just a long conversation that kept stretching, topic after topic, until everyone else faded into background noise. When I got home that night, I realized I'd been smiling the entire drive. Our first few months were easy, comfortable. We moved at a pace that felt mature, intentional. He'd cook dinner at my place, humming softly while he chopped vegetables. I'd tease him about his inability to choose a movie without reading 10 reviews first. We talked about work, about past mistakes, about what we thought love was supposed to look like at this stage of life. I remember thinking how refreshing it was to be with someone who didn't rush or play games. He told me about his family early on, close-knit, opinionated, involved, especially his mother and older sister. He mentioned his ex too, though at the time it felt like harmless context. They'd been together for 3 years, broke up about 8 months before we met. According to him, it was mutual. She wanted one thing, he wanted another. Careers, timing, the usual reasons people give when they don't want to dig deeper. I didn't ask many questions. Everyone has a past. I wasn't interested in competing with it. The first time I met his family, I tried hard to make a good impression without trying too hard. I brought wine, complimented his mother's cooking, helped clear plates. His father was polite, distant, but not unkind. His sister watched me closely, like she was cataloging my flaws for later discussion. That was when the comparison started. Quiet at first, almost unnoticeable. "Oh, his ex used to love this dish," his mom said once, smiling nostalgically. "She always remembered everyone's birthday," his sister added another time, like it was an accomplishment medal. I laughed it off, told myself I was being sensitive, told myself families take time. But it kept happening. At dinners, at holidays, at casual drop-ins, stories about how his ex fixed something around the house, how she chose the perfect gift, how she fit in so seamlessly, and every time he stayed quiet, half smiling, letting it pass, like it wasn't slowly carving something out of me. With him alone, I felt seen, confident, relaxed. Around his family, I felt like a placeholder, a temporary substitute while everyone waited for the real thing to come back. I brought it up gently, more than once. "It makes me uncomfortable when they talk about her like that," I said one evening. "I'm here now." He apologized, promised he'd talk to them, promised it would stop. It didn't. If anything, it grew bolder, more frequent, more pointed. And the hardest part wasn't what they said. It was watching him shrink around them. Watching the man who laughed with me become a version of himself desperate for their approval, nodding, smiling, never choosing me in the moments that mattered. By the time we hit a year and a half together, I was already tired in a way love isn't supposed to make you tired. I didn't know it yet, but the foundation was already cracked. I was just the last one willing to pretend it wasn't. Looking back, the warning signs weren't dramatic. There was no single moment where everything obviously went wrong. It was quieter than that, slower, like water wearing down stone. After the first few uncomfortable dinners, I started paying closer attention, not to his family, but to him, to what he did when those comments surfaced, or more accurately, what he didn't do. When his mother reminisced about how his ex used to help decorate for the holidays, he'd smile politely and change the subject. When his sister joked about how no one ever matched her energy, he'd laugh awkwardly and take another sip of his drink. And every time I waited for a glance in my direction, a squeeze of my hand, a simple, "Hey, that's not fair." It never came. At first, I told myself he was conflict avoidant, that he didn't like rocking the boat. I'd dated men like that before, men who believed peace meant silence. I tried to be understanding, tried to be patient, tried not to turn every family gathering into an emotional postmortem. But patience, when it isn't met halfway, slowly turns into self-betrayal. The comments started seeping into other areas of our life, subtle questions disguised as curiosity. "So, what are your long-term plans?" his dad asked once, looking at me like he was assessing a resume. "What do you really want out of life?" his mom added, as if the answer might disqualify me. Meanwhile, stories about his ex were never framed as questions. They were statements, proof, evidence of how well she'd fit into their world. I began to notice how often he'd defend them instead of me. "That's just how my mom talks. My sister doesn't mean anything by it. They're old-fashioned." Intent, I learned, does nothing to soften impact. The worst moment before everything unraveled happened during a Sunday brunch at his parents' house. His mother brought out old photo albums, thick ones, heavy with memory. She flipped through them slowly, stopping often. There she was, everywhere. Beach trips, birthdays, holidays, her arm around his waist, her smile frozen in glossy paper. His mother pointed at one photo and said, "That was such a wonderful time." I sat there, coffee growing cold in my hands, wondering why I'd even been invited. Why I'd dressed up, shown up, tried so hard to belong in a space that clearly hadn't made room for me. On the drive home, I finally said it again, firmer this time. "I can't keep doing this," I told him. "I feel invisible around your family." He sighed, eyes fixed on the road. "You're overthinking it." That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest, not because it was cruel, but because it was dismissive. It told me my feelings were inconvenient, that addressing them would require effort he wasn't ready to give. From that point on, the air between us shifted. Conversations felt careful, measured. I noticed myself choosing words more cautiously, afraid of being labeled sensitive or dramatic. I started pulling back without meaning to, protecting myself in small, quiet ways. And still I stayed, because part of me hoped he'd wake up, that he'd finally see what was happening and step into his role as my partner, not his family's peacekeeper. I didn't know then that the real damage wasn't being done by his family. It was being done by his silence. The night everything finally broke didn't feel dramatic at first. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, no storming out in tears. That came later. At the time, it felt almost ordinary, which somehow made it worse. It was his father's birthday, one of those obligatory family dinners you mark on your calendar weeks in advance and quietly brace yourself for. I remember standing in front of my closet longer than usual, changing outfits twice. asking myself why I was trying so hard when I already felt unwelcome. Still, I went. I always went. Dinner itself was fine, polite conversation, small talk. I laughed when appropriate, nodded when spoken to. I played my role well. It wasn't until dessert that things shifted, like they always did. His sister leaned back in her chair, fork hovering over her cake, and casually said, "Did you hear about his ex's new job? She's working at some big tech firm now, traveling all the time, making serious money." His mother's face lit up instantly. "Oh, she always had such drive," she said warmly. "So ambitious. That girl knew exactly where she was going." I felt my shoulders tense, but I stayed quiet. I'd learned silence was safer than protest in that room. Then his father added, almost thoughtfully, "She had a real plan for her life." I looked down at my plate, my appetite gone. I waited. Again. For him to say something. Anything. To remind them I existed, that I was sitting right there. He didn't. The drive home was thick with unspoken tension. Streetlights flashed across the windshield in steady intervals, illuminating his face for half a second at a time. He knew something was wrong. I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his grip on the steering wheel. Finally, he sighed. "Look, I know tonight was awkward." "Awkward?" I repeated softly. "That's one way to describe it." He hesitated, like he was weighing whether honesty was worth the fallout. Then he said it. "My family still thinks my ex was better than you in every way." The words landed with the strange calm. No explosion, no rush of anger. Just clarity, sharp and undeniable. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because disbelief needed somewhere to go. I pulled up to a red light and turned toward him. "Good to know." He frowned. "What?" "Good to know," I said again. "Thanks for being honest." He started backtracking immediately. "I didn't mean it like that. I just mean they have this image of her and they're stuck on it. It doesn't mean I think that." I looked at him then, really looked. "But you let them think it," I said, "for a year and a half." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "You've watched them compare me to her over and over," I continued, my voice steady, "and you've never once told them to stop. So either you agree with them, or you don't respect me enough to stand up for me." "That's not fair," he snapped. "You're being ridiculous." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but I'm done." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we pulled up to my apartment, I didn't invite him in. I turned to him, calm in a way that surprised even me. "I think we're done," I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "Over this? You're overreacting." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm just not interested in being someone's consolation prize." He tried to argue, said he loved me, said his family didn't matter, said I was throwing away something good over opinions. But I was already gone. I grabbed my bag from the back seat, told him to take care of himself, and walked away without looking back. That was the night the relationship ended. I just didn't know yet how loudly the consequences were about to echo. The first thing I noticed after I walked into my apartment was how quiet it felt. Not peaceful, not calm, just empty in a way that rang in my ears. I set my bag down by the door and stood there for a long moment, staring at nothing, letting the reality of what I'd just done settle into my body. I didn't cry right away. That surprised me. Instead, I felt steady, like I'd been bracing for a storm for months and it had finally passed through. My hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't tight. There was grief there, yes, but underneath it was something else. Relief. The kind you feel when you stop lying to yourself. Still, once the adrenaline faded, the questions came. Had I been too harsh? Had I expected too much? Was I wrong to walk away instead of fighting harder? I replayed the drive home again and again. His words, my response, the look on his face when I said I was done. I searched the memory for regret and came up empty. What I found instead was exhaustion. Deep, bone-level exhaustion from carrying a relationship that was never fully mine. That night, I slept badly. Every time I drifted off, I woke up thinking I'd heard my phone buzz. It hadn't. When morning came, my eyes burned, but my mind was clear. By Monday, I blocked him everywhere except email. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I knew myself well enough to know that one emotional message could pull me back into explaining, justifying, softening the truth. I didn't want to do that anymore. For 3 days, I heard nothing. Part of me assumed he'd gone straight to his family, that they'd reassured him I was too sensitive, that he deserved better. I could picture it vividly. His mother shaking her head, his sister rolling her eyes, the narrative writing itself. I kept busy, went to the gym harder than usual, cleaned my apartment top to bottom, reorganized drawers that didn't need reorganizing, anything to keep my hands occupied while my mind processes the loss. Friends asked what happened. When I told them, none of them were surprised. I saw that coming, one of them admitted gently. You looked miserable every time his family was around. That validation helped more than I expected. It reminded me that I hadn't imagined the erosion. Other people had seen it too. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone started lighting up. Blocked calls went straight to voicemail, but the notifications piled up. Then texts started coming in from an unfamiliar number. I ignored the first few. The 5th, the 8th. Please pick up. I need to talk to you. Something happened. Please just call me back. Curiosity won, or maybe closure did. I called the number. He answered on the first ring, breath hitching. Oh my God. Thank you. I didn't think you would. What's going on? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He was crying, not sniffling. Crying. The kind that steals your breath. I went to her place, he said. I closed my eyes. I already knew who he meant. Your ex? I asked. Yes, he said quickly. I just thought maybe if I talked to her, I could understand things better. Get some perspective. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I stayed quiet. Someone else answered the door, he continued, voice shaking. A woman. I didn't interrupt. She was pregnant, he said. 7 months. She said she's his fiancé. They've been together almost a year. They're getting married in 2 months. The truth landed cleanly, brutally. So the woman his family had been praising, the woman he'd been compared to relentlessly, she hadn't been waiting. She'd been building an entirely different life. And she was kind, he whispered, confused but kind. She asked if I was okay, and I just stood there, realizing he'd told her about me like I was some ex who couldn't let go. There was a long pause. I feel like an idiot, he said. I felt a flicker of sympathy, a small one, but it didn't change anything. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because now I understand, he said. I made a mistake. I should have defended you. I should have shut them down. I was wrong. Can we talk in person? No, I said gently. He started crying harder, promising change, promising boundaries, promising he'd choose me this time. But timing matters, and respect, once denied for that long, doesn't regenerate on command. You didn't value what we had when we were together, I told him, and the moment I walked away, you ran straight to her. That tells me everything. I hung up. That night, he called 6 more times. I didn't answer. I thought hanging up would be the end of it. I truly did. I believed that once the truth had surfaced, once the fantasy had cracked, things would settle into silence. I underestimated how loud denial can be when it's backed by an entire family. The next morning, I woke up to an email. Long, carefully written, apologetic in tone, but frantic underneath. He wrote about how shocked he was, how blindsided his family felt, how no one knew his ex had been building a life with another woman for almost a year. He said his mother had cried when she found out, that his sister felt humiliated for defending the wrong person. And then inevitably the pivot. He wrote that now they all saw things clearly, that they realized how unfair they'd been to me, that they finally understood my discomfort. He said his dad admitted they'd taken me for granted, that his family wanted to apologize, all of them, together. Reading it, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a dull ache at how predictable it all was. They didn't see me until the illusion shattered, until the woman they'd idolized turned out to be unavailable, uninterested, and long gone. Only then did my absence become noticeable. I didn't reply. That silence seemed to trigger a new wave. By the end of the week, messages started coming through mutual friends. Subtle at first. He's not doing well. His mom feels terrible. They all realize now how wrong they were. Each message carried the same unspoken request. Reconsider. Be understanding. Give him another chance. I declined every invitation to discuss it. What struck me most was how quickly responsibility shifted. Suddenly, everyone was scrambling to reframe the story. His family wasn't cruel. They were just misinformed. He wasn't complicit. He was just caught in the middle, and I, somehow, was now the gatekeeper of forgiveness. He tried calling again, left voicemails this time. His voice sounded different, smaller. He talked about therapy, about setting boundaries, about how losing me had forced him to see himself clearly. I'm changing, he said in one message. I wish I'd done it sooner. But growth that only happens after loss isn't a gift, it's a consequence. Then came the confrontation I hadn't expected. I ran into his older sister at a coffee shop near my office. She spotted me first. I saw the hesitation cross her face before she walked over, clutching her cup like a shield. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't waste time. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "About her. About you. About everything." I listened. She told me how blindsided they felt, how her mother had even reached out to his ex months earlier, checking in, praising her, completely unaware she was engaged and pregnant. How humiliating it was to realize they'd been clinging to a version of someone who no longer existed. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she said, "but you didn't deserve how we treated you. And for what it's worth, you handled everything with more grace than we did." I thanked her. I meant it. But I also told her the truth. "I appreciate the apology. It just doesn't change my decision." She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. Before she left, she added one last detail. "He's tried reaching out to her again. She blocked him. Her fiancé asked her to cut contact with all exes." That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not triumph, closure. The truth was doing its work now, quietly, thoroughly, and for the first time I didn't feel pulled to intervene, explain, or soften the fallout. I had already stepped out of the story. I thought the worst part would be the confrontation, the phone calls, the apologies that came too late. I was wrong. The darkest moment didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with silence. A few days after running into his sister, everything went quiet at once. No more messages through friends, no emails, no accidental reminders of his name popping up on my phone. Just empty space where a relationship used to live. That was when it hit me. I wasn't missing him the way people usually miss an ex. I wasn't longing for his voice or replaying our best moments on a loop. What I was mourning was something more unsettling. The version of my life I had imagined. The future I had quietly committed to without realizing how much of myself I'd already compromised to keep it intact. One night, I sat on the edge of my bed, lights off, city noise humming faintly through the window, and let myself finally feel it. Not anger, not regret, just grief. Clean and heavy. I grieved the dinners where I tried harder than I should have, the conversations where I minimized my discomfort to avoid conflict, the moments I swallowed words because I didn't want to be that woman. For the first time, I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. Why did I stay so long? The answer wasn't flattering. Because I wanted to be chosen. Because I believed patience would eventually be rewarded. Because part of me thought love meant enduring discomfort quietly. That realization hurt more than anything his family had ever said. I replayed memories I hadn't let myself examine before. The way my chest tightened every time his ex's name came up. The way I'd smile through comments that chipped away at me. The way I'd leave his parents' house feeling smaller, then tell myself it wasn't a big deal. That night, I cried for the woman I'd been while doing all that. The woman who mistook endurance for strength. There was a moment, sitting there in the dark, when doubt crept in. A dangerous one. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have given him time to change. Maybe walking away was easier than staying and fighting. But then another thought followed, quieter, clearer. If he was capable of choosing me, he would have done it before I left. That truth didn't comfort me, it steadied me. The next morning, I woke up exhausted but different. Like something fragile had finally broken all the way through instead of cracking halfway. I didn't feel empowered yet. I didn't feel healed. I just felt done. Done explaining myself. Done justifying my boundaries. Done carrying the emotional labor for people who only noticed me when I was gone. That was the lowest point, not because I wanted him back, but because I finally saw, without denial, how close I'd come to losing myself trying to stay. And once you see that clearly, there's no unseeing it. The shift didn't come with a dramatic revelation. No sudden phone call. No new secret uncovered. It came quietly, on a Tuesday afternoon, in a way that felt almost anticlimactic. I was sitting at my desk at work, staring at an email I'd already read twice, when I realized I wasn't distracted anymore. My thoughts weren't drifting back to him. My chest wasn't tightening at the mention of his name. The noise had finally died down enough for me to hear myself think. That's when it clicked. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need another apology. I didn't need him to fully understand what he'd lost. I already knew. Later that evening, a mutual friend called me, neutral, careful with her words. "I don't want to stir anything up," she said, "but I thought you should know. His family's really unraveling." She told me how his mother had been obsessing over the engagement news, replaying every interaction she'd had with his ex, trying to understand how she'd missed it. How his sister felt exposed, embarrassed, forced to confront how unfair she'd been. How he himself had grown quiet, withdrawn, suddenly aware of how much he'd relied on other people's approval to define his choices. None of it surprised me. What did surprise me was my reaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. After we hung up, I went for a long walk. No music, no podcast, just the sound of my own footsteps. I thought about all the moments I'd tried to earn space in a family that never intended to give it, all the ways I'd shrunk myself to make things smoother. And then I asked myself a different question. What would choosing myself actually look like now? The answer wasn't revenge. It wasn't proving anything. It was disengagement. Clean. Final. Respectful. That night, I did something small but symbolic. I went through my phone and deleted our last remaining thread. Not out of anger. Out of closure. I didn't need to preserve the evidence anymore. I also sent one final email. Short, clear, kind. I told him I accepted the apology, that I wished him growth and clarity, and that I wouldn't be continuing the conversation. No room for debate, no opening for negotiation. When I hit send, I didn't feel relief right away. What I felt was ownership of my time, my energy, my future. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't reacting to what someone else had done. I was acting in alignment with myself. That was the turning point. Not when he lost me, but when I stopped waiting for him to choose me. Once I stepped out completely, everything unfolded without me. That was the strangest part. For so long, I'd felt like the tension in that relationship depended on my patience, my silence, my willingness to absorb discomfort. Without me there to buffer it, the cracks became impossible to ignore. I didn't hear about it right away. I wasn't looking for updates. But when you share a social circle long enough, the truth has a way of finding you. His family apparently was in freefall. The engagement news hit harder than anyone expected. His mother, who had spent years keeping his ex alive in family conversations, now had to reconcile the reality that she'd been praising a woman who hadn't thought of them in nearly a year. Friends told me she was devastated, not just because the ex was gone for good, but because she felt foolish, exposed, forced to confront how much pressure she'd placed on her son's relationships. His sister withdrew almost entirely. The confidence she'd worn so comfortably evaporated once she realized how wrong she'd been. She stopped bringing up relationships altogether, stopped commenting, stopped playing the role of family authority. And him, he became the quiet one. The man who once avoided conflict now couldn't escape it. Family dinners turned awkward. Conversations stalled. The unspoken question hung in the air. Why didn't you move on sooner? Because without me there was no one left to compare. No one to project disappointment onto, just him, and the consequences of not choosing when it mattered. I heard he tried reaching out to his ex one last time, not for romance, for answers. She didn't respond. Her fiancé had made it clear that the past was closed, and for once, his family's opinions didn't factor into someone else's life. That rejection seemed to land deeper than mine. Meanwhile, invitations started coming my way. Subtle ones. Apologies delivered secondhand. His mother even tried adding me on social media, which I declined without hesitation. Later, she asked a mutual acquaintance if I'd consider meeting for coffee so she could apologize properly. I said no, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need her understanding anymore, and reopening that door would only invite old patterns back in. What struck me most was how calm I felt through all of it. No satisfaction, no urge to correct the narrative. The truth didn't need my help. It was already doing its work. Through friends, I learned he'd started therapy, that he was finally examining why he'd let his family define so much of his identity, why he'd stayed silent when silence cost him a partner who had loved him honestly. I hoped it helped him, but from a distance, because while his world was rearranging itself, mine was quietly expanding. I was rediscovering what it felt like to exist without being measured against someone else's past, to enter spaces where I didn't have to brace myself, to be chosen without condition. The fallout didn't destroy him, it clarified him, and it freed me. A month passed without his name crossing my phone screen. No messages, no updates that reached me through friends. Just space. And in that space, something unexpected happened. I healed, not in a dramatic overnight way, quietly. In the small moments that don't look